morning. I will call the March 22nd San Diego County Board of Supervisors special meeting to order. I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that one supervisor is participating via teleconference. With that, I'll now call the roll. Supervisor Anderson. Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Here.
Supervisor Desmond.
Here.
Vice Chair Vargas.
Vargas here.
Chair Fletcher.
Fletcher here. We only have one item on today's agenda, and that is to select an interim sheriff for San Diego County until the next sheriff is selected and sworn in January. As a reminder, none of the applicants who are before us today for consideration are running to be elected sheriff for a full term. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to the clerk, who is going to walk through the process we're going to go through this morning so everyone knows the steps ahead.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. The item before you today is the final step in filling the sheriff vacancy. For the benefit of the public that are watching today, I'll briefly recap the process that led to today. On February 8th, 2022, the Board of Supervisors approved the process to fill the vacancy of the elective office of sheriff. The application period began February 9th and were due to my office by Friday, March 4th. My office received 4 applications. One of the applicants withdrew their application. Last Tuesday, March 15th, the board interviewed the 3 qualified applicants and selected the finalists. The board selected all 3 applicants as finalists that you see here today: Michael Barletta, Edwin Brock, and Anthony Ray. At today's special meeting, the board will interview the finalists and select an appointee. I would like to note that we are providing simultaneous translation services for the public in 5 languages: Spanish, Filipino, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Arabic. So I will ask all speakers to please speak clearly. Now I'll review the process for this morning. Each finalist will be given 3 minutes to make a presentation. After each finalist presentation, supervisors may ask questions of the finalist. Then we'll move on to the next finalist for their presentation and questions, and so forth. The public will have an opportunity to speak after all presentations and questions. After public comment, the board may ask each finalist additional questions before the final selection. Following the final question period, I will hand out ballots to each supervisor. Supervisors will select 1 applicant, sign the ballot, and return it to me. I will tabulate the ballots and publicly announce the results. An applicant must receive at least 3 votes to be appointed. Any ties will be broken by subsequent votes among only the applicants that tied. The selected applicant will immediately begin the background process, and it is anticipated that the appointee will be sworn in on April 5th. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. To our clerk, I want to thank the members of the public that are with us today, and I want to thank our 3 applicants who each bring a lifetime of service to our community, both here in San Diego and in other areas, for the willingness to apply and be considered to serve. As a board, we take this appointment very seriously. This is a choice that voters will make for a permanent choice, but in the unique circumstances we find ourselves in, it is this board's obligation to fill the seat in the interim, and obviously, as a board, we hold very seriously the obligation to protect our residents from violent crime. We hold very seriously the obligation to improve the conditions in our jail, and of course our longstanding commitment to racial justice and fairness in building trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve are paramount to this board, and we appreciate you all. We will give you each 3 minutes, some introductory remarks, anything you would like to say. We will go in opposite direction from last time. We'll start with Mr. Barletta and work our way back, and then board member questions will go in the reverse order. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Fletcher, board. It's good to see you again. Reflecting on last week's presentations, I wanted to address a couple of items. As I mentioned last week, I started serving the public as a sheriff's explorer in 1978. As a college student a couple of years later, a professor emphasized a theory that the problem with law enforcement was that as people rose in the ranks, they increasingly acted out of self-interest. With rose-colored glasses, I didn't want to admit that was true. Once I was in the profession, I saw that there was some validity to that theory, and I vowed to always perform selflessly. I was able to be very successful in my career without falling prey to self-interest. I was able to retire with my head held high as to what I had been able to accomplish. I intend to bring that same selflessness to the office of the sheriff. I want to emphasize that I thoroughly enjoyed my almost 30-year career. The department allowed me to have a good life here in San Diego, raise a family, and enjoy my retirement. I feel strongly that I can give back a little in gratitude by serving in this role for 10 months, not looking for any sort of long-term self-serving reward. I believe in the concept that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. I think the background investigation I've gone through over the past week and the references that were contacted will underscore that my past performance has been stellar. I have the reputation of getting top-notch performance from my staff and holding poor employees accountable. This doesn't make me the favorite of errant employees, but I do have the respect of the hardworking deputies and staff who do the right thing every day. I spent 5 years of my career as Academy training staff where I helped mold the future of law enforcement in this county, leading and training Academy recruits. I was commended midway through my career for helping develop, implement, and present an innovative new statewide sergeant's training program which is still being presented today. Developing the people around me was always a goal I kept in mind, and I'm very proud of the 2 former subordinates that are seated beside me today. I take immense pride in believing that I had some part in their successful professional development. I've proven my ability to work with department members, the community, and other governmental agencies. Communication with those around me is immensely important. I intend to spend most of my workday out of the office in an effort to bridge the gap that exists between law enforcement and the community. When not meeting with the community directly, I intend to spend time in each of the sheriff's facilities with the department staff. I did that same thing in the final year of my career on the department and found it to be a very effective means of communicating. This will also allow me to serve as an effective bridge to the new sheriff's administration that comes into office next January. In closing, I'd like to say thank you to the board for ending the practice of elected officials choosing an heir apparent and giving a perceived advantage in the upcoming election. Just like in law enforcement, any opportunity for the public to be more involved is good for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brock?
Good morning, Board and Mr. Chair Fletcher. I spent in a career here at the law enforcement 27 years. I've since retired and moved on and spent the last year as a chief in South Kern County at the city of Arvin. Some of the things that I learned here at San Diego Sheriff's Department was how to learn and grow through the various phases of my career here, starting in detentions and working my way through various competitive positions in the Law Enforcement Services Bureau, from patrol, traffic, and some of the most attractive jobs that, quite frankly, TV shows are made out of. In those different jobs, you learn how to be a law enforcement professional, and San Diego County has taken it to a level that's very difficult to reach and even more challenging to maintain. I want to return to this department in this county to help lead an organization that's already strong. I'm prepared to come here and to direct the department, to support the men and women doing the majority of the work, and I'm going to lead into the changes that are very necessary. They were pointed out by different laws that were proposed, some of the laws around the country, and affect the state of California directly. And I'm here to use all of the talent and the skills that were acquired over the years. I hit a ceiling inside the department, and I saw that as a great challenge to take on some of the things that I felt would be effective changes and that would be equitable for all people. Minority status doesn't just come in the exterior of a person's look or a person's natural given sex. And I wanted to work to make sure that our processes were objective and strong and equitable so we can harvest the best talent and then pull that talent to help solve problems at every level in the various bureaus around the county. I am prepared to do that because I've taken that same philosophy up to my current position and found it to be effective. Working with people, working with men and women, is always a challenge inside and outside the department, but there's plenty of work to be done. In this particular role for these next 10 months to help San Diego County stabilize its chief law enforcement operation and to move forward through the recommendations through the inspection that was just recently completed, is my job to be an ambassador. It's my job to harvest the talent with the great assistant sheriffs we have, the commanders and the captains running the stations and the facilities, and bring about the great effort and energy that exists amongst our talent pool and to affect those changes for the betterment of San Diego citizens who should come into our custody. Moving forward, educating myself and competing in various processes around the country has helped make me reflect on what was given to me, what I was mentored through, and what I learned through formal education and self-directed education. I believe San Diego County is very strong, and I can continue contributing to this organization specifically. I'm prepared to do this job, and I have an open heart of gratitude for the two men here who are, one is my peer and one is my division commander on multiple occasions. I think, thank you.
Mr. Ray?
Chair Fletcher, member of the board, good morning. My goal is to make sure the Sheriff's Department operates at a very high level for the next 9 months until the newly elected sheriff can be installed. And my job is to set the tone and make sure everybody else does their jobs. Now, today you're going to pick an interim sheriff, and I believe I'm uniquely qualified to do the job as I'm already inside the department. But I have the ability to navigate the department, the county, the people we work with. I'm running 2 of our 5 bureaus right now and have leadership experience, training, and education. The goals that I would have as your sheriff, the primary 4 would be public safety, staffing, public trust, and of course, working on the implementations of the JLAC audit, which is probably the #1 priority we have right now in the department. To support those areas, these are the things that I would be doing. In the Human Resources Bureau, we're going to be working on recruiting, retention, and the wellness program. In the Court Services Bureau, we have to work on preparing all of our people to start in-person courts totally 100% starting July 1st. That's going to be difficult because we have a reduced staff. Our Detentions Bureau is still under COVID restrictions and probably will be when the courts go full-time. And we have to coordinate with our justice partners. On the law enforcement side, I want to continue our data-driven approach. I'd like to highlight 2 strategies that we have. One is an impact. One is called accountability. Now, the impact is when we bring all of the station leaders together with the intelligence analysts. We identify what are the problems, what are the goals, what are the things that we need to work on. We create the strategy and put everybody on the same page for that command area. The accountability is when we have the station commanders come and do a presentation to the command staff and let us know what's going well in the command and why is it going well, and what's going poorly in the command and what are you going to do about it. The accountability and the impact help everybody from the rank of bottom line patrol deputy to sheriff have an understanding of what's going on so we can better support each other in those endeavors. Now, in the detention side, obviously the #1 goal we have is implementing the JLAC audit recommendations. That has to be done, but I also want to bring back the reentry programs we had to the pre-COVID levels. And the reentry programs, they're vital. They basically, we teach job functions, we teach coping skills so that people that are leaving our facilities can have a better chance of success once they enter the field. In terms of public trust, I want to expand our community engagement. I want to highlight the many good things the deputies do on a daily basis, and I'm willing to work on those things with the community that need to be worked on. In closing, I'd like to say that 9 months is not a long time, but I think I can drive the department forward at a very high level and make a difference in our communities, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Let me ask board members if you have any questions before we hear from public speakers. We have an opportunity after as well. Okay, not seeing any. Let me ask the clerk to call forward our public speakers, and then we'll come back to the board.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We have 11 requests to speak on this item, 7 in person and 4 by phone. Also note for the record that we received 9 e-comments, 1 in favor, 1 in opposition, and 7 neutral. Any members of the public that requested to speak by phone on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll begin with the in-person speakers. All of these speakers are in favor. As your name is called, please come forward and stand against the east wall under the murals until it is your turn to speak. I'll be calling you in groups of 5. I'd like to invite forward the following speakers: Mary D., Tom Packard, Yusef Miller, Robin Sales, and Darwin Fishman. If your name is called, please come forward. You may come forward in any order. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board, and I'll ask you to please state your name for the audio record.
Hi, my name is Robin Sales. 200 people since 2009, 5 so far this year. My name is Robin Sales, and I represent Showing Up for Racial Justice North County, San Diego as a co-founder. I am part of a multiracial coalition with the Racial Justice Coalition and the North County Equity and Justice Coalition. And I've come before you to say enough is enough. So many people have died in county jails and streets under the watch of the Sheriff's Department, led by Bill Gore and Kelly Martinez, and it goes on and on. What is the cost of doing business as usual at the San Diego Sheriff's Department? Eliza Serna, Paul Silver, Omar Arroyo Moreno, and so many others have lost their lives when their behavioral health issues have intersected with the Sheriff's Department. Why should that be a death sentence? Not to mention millions of dollars of our taxpayer money paid out in civil suits and the appalling lack of accountability by the law enforcement and the DA. The Sheriff's Department clearly cannot police itself or the jails, and lives are lost so frequently that I fear the Board of Supervisors has become immune to hearing about it. It's good that Assemblywoman Akilah Weber brought forth the Saving Lives in Custody Act, and we will work hard to get it passed. But as a county, you must view these deaths as a crisis that needs to be addressed now. Enough is enough. We applaud Supervisor Lawson-Raymer's work in Alternatives to Incarceration Project, but we can't ignore that at this rate, at least 15 people will die in custody in 2022. It's time to ask the state to take over running our jails until the Sheriff's Department can do so humanely and effectively. The Board of Supervisors must act as people are dying who should have been in treatment and on the path to a healthy life. We will continue to come before you to challenge the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Chair Fletcher, members of the board, my name is Tom Packard. I'm a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice in North County. Given the unacceptable number of jail deaths, I'd appreciate it if you would ask each of the candidates what they see as the key causal factors and problems that each will address to prevent jail deaths. Specifically, what will they do as a leader to change the organizational culture in the jails to ensure safe and quality conditions and treatment for all inmates by sworn and civilian staff. Organizational culture change takes years, but someone in this temporary position can make an important first step to change the culture in the jails. Thanks for your attention and thanks for your transparency on this process.
Good morning. My name is Yusef Miller. I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the co-founder of the Saving Lives in Custody campaign of 2020. We've been fighting against the loss of life in custody for a couple years now, and we thank Dr. Akilah Weber for coming forth with the Saving Lives in Custody Act, AB 2343. This crisis that we're in is something that we have to vote a non-confidence in any of our candidates that are running for interim sheriff. We vote non-confidence, and we want in that place for the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, to take over in this interim period of 9 to 10 months. That office has been taking over for people who, or departments have violated the patterns and practices for years. In 1991, we saw it happen with the Rodney King case. In 2016, the then Attorney General, who is now our Vice President of these United States, Kamala Harris, also took over for and investigated 2 Metropolitan Police at that time. So we're not asking for anything that has not been done before, no unprecedented thing. We're asking for, in this crisis, that we ask the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, to come in the interim to make sure that these reforms are implemented and we save lives. Just last week, we lost 2 lives. While we were up in the Capitol at Sacramento, the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, and the Racial Justice Coalition, we were in North County, in North California, and we received 2 notices that we lost lives in custody. This is a crisis. These families are suffering, and it's only a matter of time before the next one happens. We ask again, Attorney General Rob Bonta to come in and take over in the interim of this 9 or 10 months before you select a new sheriff. Thank you.
As next speaker is coming forward, I'll call the remaining speakers in favor, Robert Brown and Eric Garcia.
Good morning, Board. Mary D. here. I am here today to urge the Board to select whichever candidate will restore common sense and constitutional law to our county in his role as interim sheriff. It is imperative that we have a sheriff who will use judicious discretion when it comes to the blanket policies of SB 54. While that statewide legislation might have had good intentions, the consequences have come at a very steep price and imperil the very people it purports to want to protect. I urge restoration of what I call grandmother wisdom, AKA common sense, giving blanket shield to absolutely anyone who commits a crime, regardless of the circumstances, sets the stage for a future tragedy down the line. I am here today to represent the voice of the voiceless, those who have been harmed by SB 54 and will never get the chance to speak for themselves. One glaring example is a recent quadruple homicide at a Sacramento church. David Mora Rojas was in the country illegally. He was arrested on February 23rd for driving under the influence, but also assaulting an officer and medical staff. He had a prior involuntary mental health hold and had made threats to harm himself and his estranged girlfriend. He was the poster child of a grave threat to the community. But because of the blanket policies of SB 54, which opts to prioritize the rights of serious criminals above the rights of people to live safely in their own communities, ICE was not notified. 5 days later, he went on to kill his 3 beautiful children, as well as an adult chaperone. This is a picture of who SB 54 harmed. These 3 precious girls were people of color. Their lives mattered. They are now the collateral damage of your policy, which deemed them expendable. Any politician or sheriff who supports giving harbor and prioritizing serious criminals over the lives of beautiful, innocent children has sangre en sus manos. The blood of these children are on your hands. Restore common sense and pick somebody who does not prioritize criminals. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Darwin Fishman. I'm part of the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego and North County Equity and Justice Coalition. And we are here calling for you, the Board of Supervisors. We appreciate this opportunity to call for you to request from the California AG that they take over our jail system here in San Diego, and that they appoint a special master to oversee, and that they do it in terms of the period, whatever is needed. We are worried that with this current process of filling the vacancy of the interim sheriff, that we will still have the steady drumbeat of deaths. We have been engaged actively in a SLICK campaign, Saving Lives in Custody, spearheaded by Yusuf Miller, that has been described to you. It's heart-wrenching to come out every month with the families, the impacted families. We organize these actions. Every month they come out and tell us how they've lost loved ones. It's beyond, I mean, we thought after the state auditor's report there'd be some sense that they would be taken seriously and that there'd be some effort to actually change this practice. But we've seen now with Gore retiring, Martinez is the interim, just more people are dying. There's no reason for this. So many of the people that are put in jail should not have been there in the first place. And again, thank you, Supervisor Lawson-Raymer, for your work on alternatives to incarceration. Once they're put in the jails, it's clear that there's no accountability, there's no sense of life. It almost seems like the county is not just stuck on killing people, but that the way you want to resolve this is through multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Is $85 million lawsuit not good enough for you to understand that these are human lives that never should have been killed in the first place? Do we have to go through the next 8 months, 9 months of seeing these deaths, 2, 3 a month? It's in your power to ask the state AG to take over immediately and to have a special master oversee the jails in San Diego County. That's what we're asking for. Thank you.
Good morning. I was introduced to you all last week. My name is Dr. Brown, and I really want to thank you all for the hard work you do. A lot of people don't know how hard you work, but I know that there's no such thing as a good night's sleep for all of you. So with that in mind, I want to talk to you about a few things that I think you should know. First of all, I'm from the South. Where I'm from, I never thought I would see the type of advocacy that's behind me right now. Every life is precious. I'm a mama's boy, I admit that. Baby sister always said to me, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see. I have read the auditor's report. It left out some extremely critical metrics that should have been included in that report. I've read the Center for Policing Equity's report. They did the same thing with their metrics and numbers. The report does not say, like that was reflected in the news this week, that San Diego County jails have the highest death rate, like they've said LA County does. Still, that doesn't excuse a death. I would welcome an opportunity to sit down with either of you and explain those reports to you, what they're actually saying. Now, thank God for Maria Nieta Senor, the woman who taught me how to understand statistics and when people are using them, what they can do to you, how they can influence you believe them. And I couldn't be here, I wouldn't understand if it wasn't for her. But you have to review the reports. They're supposed to outline things that could make things differently in these reports, that could mean something better for this organization. With that, I'll yield back. Thank you again for your hard work.
Thank you.
Hello and good morning. My name is Eric Garcia. I'm the Vice President of the San Diego Deputy Sheriff's Association. I speak before you today to advocate the DSA's position in fully supporting Anthony Ray for the position of interim sheriff. As you know, Anthony Ray is currently the Assistant Sheriff overseeing our court services and human resources bureaus for the Sheriff's Department. After having served over a decade with this department, I have seen Anthony Ray work in numerous assignments, including lieutenant, captain, commander, and now assistant sheriff. During his tenure in these leadership roles, Assistant Sheriff Ray has always been a respected, admired, and trusted member of our command staff. He has the confidence and respect of the hardworking deputies on the front lines protecting this county. Assistant Sheriff Ray has always demonstrated an ability to represent the values of not only our department, but also the County of San Diego. He is approachable, experienced, open-minded, and passionate about serving the great citizens of San Diego. The Deputy Sheriff's Association strongly supports Anthony Ray for the position of interim sheriff, and we ask for all of you to do the same. Thank you for your time.
Now we'll hear from those that requested to speak by phone. When it is your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted and you will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments after the beep. I'll remind the callers that they should mute their TV or live video stream before they begin speaking. We'll begin with our first caller. And for our first caller, your device might be muted. We just lost that caller. We'll begin with the next caller. And again, for our next caller, your device might be muted. And for our next caller, Chair Fletcher, it appears as if we're having an issue with the call-in system. Let me try these callers again. For the callers, we're going to restart the call-in system. Just give us a moment, and if you could dial back in about 2 minutes, we'll get that restarted. Thank you so much. Apologize for the technical issues.
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios host and
your 6-digit PIN number. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Call-In Studio web interface.
Calling call.
Enter your 6-digit PIN. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Call-in Studio web interface.
Transparent, but it's now more than ever.
Now we can hear the caller. Caller Aaron Suramoto Grassi, if you'd like to begin your comments.
Oh, okay, I'm going to try again. Let's see if it works this time.
Perfect, we can hear you. Thank you so much.
My name is Erin Suramoto Grassi. I'm the Policy Director at Alliance San Diego. Alliance San Diego appreciates that the Board of Supervisors committed to choosing an interim who is not concurrently running for sheriff to allow the voters to decide who they would like to hold the office starting in January 2023. Public safety is dependent on community trust, and past San Diego Sheriff leadership has eroded community trust through a lack of accountability and transparency and by colluding with DHS agencies who have a culture of impunity and abuse. We want an interim sheriff who will address racial profiling, in-custody death rates, and end collusion with DHS, including transferring individuals to ICE. And we want that person to work with the community to come up with solutions to address these problems. The San Diego Sheriff's Department has a responsibility to ensure that everyone in our county feels safe, regardless of immigration status. That can only happen if the interim sheriff commits to addressing the inequities in policing that currently exist and commits to ending collusion with DHS agencies, including stopping ICE transfers and notifications. It will take courage to address these problems and actively work to make the department more accountable and transparent, but it is needed now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Now hear from our next caller.
He's corrupt, just like you guys, and more people are going to die in the county. You should be picking somebody that will uphold their Constitution and their oath to the Constitution, not police the people. And the people need to realize that we don't need a sheriff to, change things. We, the people, have the authority. We have more authority than the sheriff and the government. And so people realize that, and we know that we don't even need to listen to what they're doing and who they're picking, because we, the people, can take care of whatever we need to in this county to make things right, because we know that they will never do that. They're always going to be on the wrong side of history while people die, while they discriminate against everybody. This man, Anthony Ray, is going to do nothing good for the county. In fact, it's going to be even worse for the next 9 months. So I ask that everybody pray for this county, because what they're doing is destroying it. They don't even care that they're killing people. That should be stopped. I mean, we talk about people dying in prisons, but how about all the people dying from the vaccines and the fact that they're injecting people with HIV? They don't want to do anything about that, which this Anthony Ray should do, but he can't because he's corrupt and he's already indoctrinated into the system. Thank God it's only 9 months. Thank God it's not longer, but I urge everybody to pray, because what's to come for the next 9 months is going to be terrifying with this man being a part of the sheriff's station and trying to, who knows, tell people what to do. But just watch your back, because you will be arrested if you don't do what's right for the people. So I suggest that you do the right thing and, you yourself pray to God so he can guide you in this.
Can you please state your name for the audio record? For the record, that caller was Audra. Go to the next caller. For the next caller, your device might be muted.
Can you hear me okay now?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dave Myers, and I am a candidate for sheriff. I want to say at the last meeting, none of the 3 candidates for interim sheriff knew about SB 54. I find this extremely troubling, since I've worked with all 3, and I know that all 3 are very familiar with it. Our communities are hurting. They support law enforcement that can be trusted. We have not heard from any candidate their plan to immediately stop jail death. We recently seen a video of a de-escalation failure when during the service of an eviction notice, a woman was shot and killed and a police officer stabbed. Many of the members of the Board of Supervisors support a sheriff elected by the people. I applaud that. The phrase used is not wanting to put their thumb on the scale of an election. If an interim sheriff who will only hold a position for 10 months is allowed to permanently promote individuals, the people's voice, the people's choice for sheriff would have immediately been silenced. Change is coming, and it must happen within the sheriff's department because the status quo is failing the citizens. Please honor the people's choice and don't mute their voices by allowing an interim sheriff to make permanent promotions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now hear from our final caller. And for our final caller, it looks like your device might be muted. Dulce Garcia. Looks like we just lost that caller. If they rejoin, I'll let you know. Chair Fletcher, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you. Thank you to all the callers and public commenters who joined us today. I think, we have a number of challenges as we've outlined. We have issues surrounding rise in violent crime. We have recruiting and retention issues that we must address, ensuring we build trust, and of course the need to go in a new direction in our jails. This board has been very engaged on this for a number of years around the health care, the behavioral health, the mental health settings, and take very seriously the reports of the recent audit. Our board is also in support of Dr. Akilah Weber's legislation to bring this forward, and we will continue to do everything we can to do that. The appointment, while limited in duration, still can be of significant consequence in terms of deciding, are we going to go in a new direction, address some of these pressing issues, and get a lot of work done without the pressure of having to be engaged and involved in an election. How do we set up our department for success? How do we lay the foundation for that new sheriff to come in and inherit a better situation? And I think those are issues that are top of mind for this board. And so let me go to my colleagues and see what questions they would like to answer. And the caller joined. Okay, let's hear from the caller, and then we'll go to my colleagues.
Again, for the caller, Dulce Garcia, would like to begin your comments?
Okay, Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher, and thank you for all the candidates that are here today. And, I think since day one that I took office, I've been really working to protect the health and well-being of our communities, and also that includes, of course, those folks who are also in custody as well. And I'm really happy to hear that after our board took a unanimous vote last week to accept the recommendations from the audit, that Dr. Akilah Weber has also made, has proposed legislation to address some of the issues that were very concerning to so many of us in that audit. I know that we're heading in the right direction, and I am looking forward for this work to be moving really quickly and for us to make sure that everyone is safe. One of the questions that I had for all of the candidates was, things move very quickly in the County of San Diego, and in your new role, can you tell us a little bit about what techniques you're going to employ so that you can keep not only the board but the CAO informed of projects, problems that come up, or issues, provide examples of techniques that you've used in the past, and then also how you're going to include or make sure that our communities are integrated into this process as well.
Good morning. Thank you. That's a great question. So my goal would be to have a weekly update either the beginning of the week or the end of the week with your staff members, and then try to set up actual individual meetings with the supervisors themselves to start with. But as we work together during the course of the next 10 months, I'd like to have a game plan of this is what we're going to do this week. The next week would be this is what happened last week, and this is what we're going to work now and in the following week. So every week we could touch on some of the major projects that we have. And we're a large department with, well, we're a large county with many people all over that. But in the department, we have many different areas going at one time. It's very difficult for one person to have everything under their thumb. So I think we'd have to have that constant communication. And that would be at the highest level and also between your staffers and the people that would work for me so that we can make sure we have the inputs coming and going. I would also, in terms of that, like to do the same. I'd be willing to sit down and listen to the gentleman and the lady that spoke here to hear any complaints they have so we could work on what they think should be proper and we could educate each other what we can and can't do and what the possibilities are. So I would like to do that kind of outreach in that area. In the past, I found that the regular communication is key. You can't say, I'll meet you a month from now or even 3 weeks from now. You have to have constant conversations so that the items that are important don't get pushed to the side until the last minute and no work actually comes on site of that. That's basically how I approach that.
Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things I've done successfully in the past and currently in my position is to report out. Now, setting COVID aside and using technology to provide reports and virtual meetings, keeping people informed in our sheriff's accountability style. We bring our division commanders and our station commanders together periodically to report on the processes of what's working, what's in the plan, and what's not working, and how we redirect. So that's regular way of reporting out and to account for our progress on where we are. It helps keep people informed by sharing the different steps and different types of help we may need that would be different from the time we first started out. As far as integrating the community, there's an opportunity to share that same information that I could share with the board through my commanders and different members of the staff. That's a development opportunity for them to report out and to get accustomed to these environments and familiar with the surroundings and build a bridge for themselves as far as sharing these different progresses and then having a role in playing in them. Using the staff and talking to the different community members and these organizations that were a small portion of them represented here today, we pretty much have to hit the road the old way. We can't rely on email and messages and written documents, although they're very helpful. A face behind this and a person who can be accessed and held accountable and then engaged will help build the bridges. I think if we just simply revert back, I intend to revert back to the old way of doing business, is get on the road and make myself available to the various communities who share the concerns, because at the end, we all have a common goal that we're working towards. I think that needs to be known and it needs to be demonstrated through my presence.
So just a couple of points. First, I think it's important that the sheriff recognize that it's a 724 position, so always available. So any time that the board has a question, I think it's appropriate for the sheriff to answer that question. However, we have a structure within the county, and I think it's very important that the sheriff communicate appropriately with the deputy CAO over the public safety group, because it's important that we work with our justice partners as well. The sheriff is not going to solve any one single problem by themselves. That brings me to my next point, and that would be relative to including the community. From many of the questions that I heard, many of the perspectives that I've heard from the speakers, I think it's important for the sheriff to outreach to the community and invite ride-alongs. The process works right now for patrol ride-alongs kind of as a, I don't know, a thrill. And that should not be the intention. The intention should actually be for the community to learn what the job entails. And I think it needs to broaden more than just in patrol. But there's nothing wrong with inviting the community into the jails to see what it's like in there for both the inmates and the staff. And so that would be my method of including the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wasson-Reamer.
Yeah, thank you to all three of you for frankly coming back here again. I really appreciate your time and your dedication to public service. I wanted to circle back to a question that we raised last time as well, which is to better understand sort of your thoughts and approach to the potential collaboration between ICE and the Sheriff's Department. You know, I think we've certainly expressed concerns about, and just echoing things my colleagues have already said today, and I just wanted to follow up on that question.
So I appreciate the question, and I realize it is a very sensitive issue, but quite frankly, we've been practicing the requirements in SB 54 for some time. We disconnected our relationship before ICE was formed, we disconnected our relationship with federal agents who were important by way of making traffic stops and then turning them over for immigration purposes. The sanctuary city serves a purpose. It certainly has a role to play. However, myself as a sheriff, I want my deputies, I want the men and women who make themselves available by way of patrol to be available for our local crimes and to address the issues as a peace officer and help work the community's problems and journey with them to the resolution of that particular call. If a person's status comes into play, that can be followed up by the appropriate agency on their own accord, barring a court order or a warrant. I do not believe it's my place to make arrangements for a person to have their status addressed here. Addressing local crime is what I've sworn to do as a peace officer, and the men and women of this department are sworn to do the exact same thing. The federal crimes as they pertain to immigration is the responsibility of different agencies, and they have their own missions to execute. We will partner with those organizations in the extent that the law allows us to, by way of warrant or court order, as I mentioned earlier. An individual here who has behavior that calls law enforcement's attention will certainly be addressed, and nothing more than that. Our professional organizations have a way to work, but we also have a duty to do, and our roles coming together provide for the overall safety of the county. I think the law serves a purpose, but I also think that it's important that we understand our roles and we can work collaboratively without infringing on anyone's basic human rights. Individuals that are here need to come here legally. If they're not here legally, there are resources that they should have fair and unfettered access to correct their status, in addition to addressing anything else that government may call them to address.
Excuse me. I think, as I expressed last week, there seems to be a tension between the community's need for feeling safe and the marginalized communities for feeling safe as well, being protected from federal enforcement. So in my reading of the Trust Act, I think Sheriff Gore did a very good job of separating himself from the federal agencies and complying with the law that said that only certain violent felons would be turned over to immigration agencies, and I would intend to stick by that policy.
So the Sheriff's Department is not in the immigration business. And I think since SB 54 came into being, we've had the strict policy of we don't call immigration in the field to hand anybody over. It's only happened one time. There was one offender. We did an investigation on that person immediately, and he quit immediately after we started the investigation. And I would continue that policy. In terms of the jails, we're not in the immigration business, but the law does provide that people with judicial warrants or meeting certain types of convictions will be passed over. So if I was your sheriff, I would continue to follow the law the way it's stated for the state of California. And if it changed, then I would change our operation.
Thank you. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. And, you know, I don't have any questions, but I just want to comment that I want to thank all three applicants for applying. You know, the County of San Diego is very lucky that we've got so many qualified leaders willing to step up into this interim position. You know, Mr. Brock, you've served as the country as a Marine and the Sheriff's Deputy. You're a fantastic communicator, and I always have enjoyed listening to you and your answers, and I know you've got a great deal to offer. Mr. Barletta, you've had over 3 decades of law enforcement service and now serve as a private consultant. You seem to understand what it takes to be a sheriff's deputy, and that's very much a sheriff's deputy in your law enforcement service is very much appreciated. And then Mr. Ray, also, you've served the County of San Diego for 3 decades in multiple roles in the San Diego Sheriff's Department. And I think all 3 of you can certainly serve out as the, as the interim sheriff. So I know you'd all do a great job, and I really kind of appreciate the camaraderie that you've shown, the fact that you've all worked together before, and here you are, you know, competing, I guess, for this same interim job and doing it in a very a professional manner is very much appreciated. I know you'll all do a great job, and but it's going to come down to one of you, and I'm assuming we're going to be voting soon. So thank you very much for being here and answering the questions as you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. I've got just a question around the situation in the jails. Obviously, at our last meeting, we spent a considerable amount of time on this, both as a board. As a board, we embraced unanimously the findings of the JLAC audit, embraced the need to move forward with those, supporting the legislation that has been brought forward. There's been suggestions around the Attorney General. That requires a court order. That is not something the Attorney General can just decide to do. And I think what we have in front of us is a path where we need to move forward now. And obviously, we have added hundreds of positions to do those screenings and intake assessments. They're very challenging to staff. Significant shortage of behavioral health workers out there, but we're moving to do that. We're working as a board. We funded renovations. It was one of the things the audit called for, is renovations within our existing system, so there is space for those mental health treatments, for those drug treatments, for those social workers to connect people to additional services. Again, none of those things happen fast enough or quick enough, but we are moving forward. But my question for each of you is not which one recommendation you think, but day one, if you're sheriff, what is your highest priority? Day one as sheriff, what is your highest priority as it relates to addressing the situation in the jail? I think we can all agree that any loss of life is too much, and the situation that we are in right now is unacceptable, and we have to do better. As a county, we have to do better. And so what are the actions, the implementations, the culture change, the process? What are you going to do to try and help improve the situation in our jails on day one?
Before I left county service, I served on a committee with other county agencies looking at the implementation of Laura's Law. And there was a recent story in the Union Tribune about the way that the Laura's Law has been used in the county, and that it has only been used 10 times since its implementation. So my number one priority relative to the jails would be looking at mental health services. Unfortunately, the mental health burden falls on the sheriff predominantly in our county, and that's a mistake. We have very well-meaning deputies, but they aren't trained in the mental health field. And so, as we mentioned last week, there has been an increase of funding with an intention to increase staffing relative to mental health services in the jail, and I think that's the number one area where we can affect unnecessary deaths in custody. Old age, severe illness, that's not something that can be fixed quickly by policy changes, but the way that we deal with the mentally ill in custody is definitely something we can work on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my technique immediately would be to re-recruit the deputies by sharing the results of the studies, sharing the results of the audit, and reminding them the importance of the job and the oath that we took as peace officers, specifically working in detentions, as a totally separate profession from working on the streets and patrol and that type of law enforcement. I would re-recruit them by reminding them of the professionalism that's required and the job that they promised to do to uphold the laws in the state of California. And I would share with them and connect with them because I believe that every person who wears a badge has a very good understanding of the meaning of life and the value of life. We need to re-emphasize that as a Christian man, as a Roman Catholic, as a basically decent person. Everyone can be appealed to by way of morality in our everyday actions. No exceptions, no days off, because that's pretty much what's extended to us in the most simplest of tasks being executed throughout the day. Bus drivers, food handlers, cooks, attorneys, administrators, all over the world, there's some basic morality that can be drawn. You can find good in every single person. It's not our place to be the jailer and the judge, and that's called for by moral law and by natural law just as well. I would recruit new members by appealing to the law enforcement clubs, a lot of the clubs and the organizations represented here today. I would ask these young men and women to take their passionate speeches and put it to action and come join our ranks in the various positions that we have available, whether you're a law enforcement professional or medical or mental health professional. I'm appealing to every single person who has something to say at the microphone. We in the county don't have age restrictions for law enforcement. We have open doors and we need the help. I would recruit at nursing schools. I want to speak to the clubs. I want to go to their professional organizations once they graduate, become licensed. I'm going to constantly make this appeal that we need the help. It was mentioned here today by one of my peers, we can't do it alone, and we've known this for decades in law enforcement. We can't do it alone. We've been remiss at different times in the history of law enforcement, but we know better, so we should do better. It's us and the community, although it's primarily our responsibility. I want to appeal to people to help us accomplish this task, and I want to appeal to the humanity in every person to take care of our brothers and sisters who happen to be in custody for whatever reason.
That's a big question. I think I have a three-step approach. The first would be the message. We have to put everybody absolutely on this, pardon me, we have to put everybody absolutely on the same page. We have to understand what the mission is and what we're trying to do. And Before I go further, I would like to say that our department is filled with thousands of incredibly motivated people. I mean, our detention's medical folks and our detention's deputies, they show up every day. When COVID was new, and there was no testing, and there was no vaccine, they knew people were sick inside, and they willingly entered the module many times during the course of the day to feed, clothe, deliver mail, deliver services. I mean, without the people that we have, these men and women of character, we couldn't operate, and we need to keep these people on the same page. They have to know that we value them, and that we're all working together, and that we support them, and the board has graciously funded a number of the changes that we can make right now. So first, it would be getting everybody on the same page. The second thing would be doing the process review. And the audit, I mean, I think I mentioned last time that we worked with the auditors to create some of the recommendations that we actually have right now. And while we don't have enough mental clinicians to go 724 to be in all the places, we've developed processes like a mental clinician at one facility being able to tele-examine someone to another facility when we don't have someone at the other facility. So everybody that's coming inside our jails right now at the intake are getting that mental health care, or the majority are getting reviewed, not just by a medical nurse, but a mental health clinician that can actually take a look and see what's going on. I want to review all of our protocols, the ones that we're already doing right now because of the audit. We'd have to look and see what can we do better, what should we change, how should we change it, what do we need? You've certainly given us the resources. Now it's the ball's in our court to actually say what we want to do when you did that. I think the third would be communication. I mean, you can't send a message out one time and expect it to last. The culture comes from the change by the leaders demonstrating what it is that we're trying to do, demanding that from your people, driving that all the way down, then rewarding the positive behavior and dealing with those folks that don't want to be on the team. But to me, it's a three-step process, getting everybody on the same page with a good message. It's doing a process review, and then keeping that communication constant.
Well, whichever one of you end up being the interim sheriff, you're going to find allies in this board and willing to support you in this effort. And there has not been a single proposal brought to us to help improve the situation in the jails we haven't funded, that we haven't moved forward with. We haven't said, yes, let's do it. You know, let's figure out how we take very seriously, you know, that challenge and charge. We're also trying to do our part as recognition that, you know, you inherit a lot of breakdowns in society that end up in your lap as kind of the last stop. And we know that, and we recognize that. And so the efforts that we are doing around mobile crisis response teams countywide, around crisis stabilization units, around person-centered care coordination, all of the investments that we are making are designed to try and help those individuals before it gets to the point where they have to land up in your care and in custody. And all of these things together, we're moving forward, but we've got to show the outcomes. Right? We can say we passed it and we built it and we funded it and we staffed it, but we've got to show that it's making a difference. And that, I think, is the burden on us moving forward, is to show that the steps that we've taken are going to have an impact and do good. And ultimately, we're all going to get held accountable for that. You know, even though the jail operations is a purview of the sheriff, and that was clearly outlined by the auditor, we all, you know, have an obligation to be a part of this. And so whichever one of you ends up in this role, know that this board is committed to addressing this, and we'll be here to work with you. My last question surrounds the kind of dual challenges that I think we face around law enforcement in general. I think I know for a fact that the public and this Board of Supervisors appreciate our deputies. We value our deputies. We value the work that they do. We know that it's hard. We know that it is incredibly difficult, and we value and appreciate that. But there are segments of the community where that trust has been broken. And we don't have that. And trust is a very hard thing when it's been broken to restore. And so I'd like each of you to talk about how you're going to work on that issue of trust between the community and law enforcement, particularly in some of the most challenging areas. And then secondarily, right, that lack of trust cuts both ways, where deputies often don't feel supported. And that can lead to the issues that we have around recruiting. It can lead to issues we have around retention. It can also just lead to an overall impact on performance. And so how do you simultaneously motivate and inspire your workforce and the deputies that are out there and support them, while also addressing the issues of the community, because we have to do both. It's not one or the other. We have to do both, and I'm curious what strategies you would employ on this.
Mr. Chair, that question is a topic that should be discussed every day at every agency across the country. And I certainly agree that the trust is broken and there's work, seemingly endless work, that needs to be done. My technique would be to own every single thing that law enforcement has to own. I took an oath for a public position, and I'm going to fill that oath by way of being the person I am. My example to the men and women who work for me will be to stand up and fill the role of deputy sheriff or peace officer. I think our academies can add a little more emphasis on the title that the state of California has bestowed upon us, opposed to what television would have everyone be drawn to. Detective, SWAT, investigator, FBI, the acronyms. Those things are some of the positions that we do. Some of them name the organization and the function in the title. However, we are peace officers, and our job is to help bring resolution to some of the problems that people find themselves into at different periods in life. Our job as a peace officer is to work with people. It's not to be a domineering presence or an occupying force. Those days and those eras of law enforcement are gone, and they're proven, and they're proven to be failures. And all they did was drive wedges in between generations after generations. I myself do not subscribe to what I was taught. I thoroughly reject what I was taught as an African-American male growing up in Philadelphia. I don't want to water down or devalue anyone else's experience. I can only speak for me. My perspective has changed when my education changed, when my exposure changed, when I started to open up. I let go of past hurt and past pain, and every single person can do that. Organizations can do that. We still suffer from some of those behaviors in my beloved Sheriff's Department. I saw some of them, but I also know that the same organization comes from the same communities we police, and we actually need more people from the same communities we police that touches all spans of humanity. Races, sexes, orientation, every single title or category we bring up, we need to appeal to it, we need to use it, and as I said in my previous statement on the other question, we need to appeal to humanity and one another. At the end of the day, we all want our lives. We want to come back the next day and the next day, so on and so on, until we're called away by a higher power, and we need to appeal to that. If I value my life, I should understand that the person I'm dealing with in any capacity values his or her life just as well. So I have to own what law enforcement is sworn to do. Someone mentioned it earlier in a very passionate statement. And I feel no need, zero obligation whatsoever to defend law enforcement's checkered history where it did not contribute to building up of humanity. I think we need to acknowledge that, and we need to show where we have grown from that and become better people. It takes men and women to do the job of policing and helping men and women, and we can't minimize the idea of helping one another, because that's why we're called peace officers in most states across the country. As far as bringing in peace officers, it is my job to recruit and to demonstrate and behave that way, and also I would have to hold my peers accountable. That executive rank, that executive branch in most departments seems to be unpoliced at times. At least I know I personally felt that way, because some of our commanders and assistant sheriffs or some people of rank seem to have more subjectivity in how they run the bureau versus the objectivity that the men and women are working under. And when we start with different premises, you don't end up on the same place. That causes problems, and that causes the distrust within the ranks. I think being open and accessible and accountable to the things that I do, thought, word, and deed, is an ongoing responsibility of myself as a leader. It's a responsibility of every leader, but I can certainly tell you about me. I don't shy away from that responsibility. I think those techniques of making myself available to the community and to my men and women that work for me are the same men and women that I work for just as well. My style of collaborative and servant leadership is effective, and I would like you to test me on that by seeing me into this position here. Thank you.
I believe that an organization reflects its leadership. A good leader, good organization; poor leader, poor organization. I believe that when you want people to have character, treat people with dignity and respect, your leadership has to be the same way, and it's a message that has to be driven all the way down. I agree with Eddie. We should have conversations with our people in terms of character, courage, doing the right thing. I do that all the time with my own groups now, regularly, in terms of, like, I have the internal affairs unit. I tell these people they have to be absolutely pristine in what they do, because if they show poor character, no one's going to trust the sheriff's department. I believe that a leader has to demonstrate what they ask other people to do. So as a sheriff, and as the assistant sheriff and the commander and lieutenant, and all the way down to when I was a patrol deputy, I enjoy meeting with the community. I know that the conversations are not always easy, but I think what I would have to do as the interim sheriff to prove to folks that we really want to do a good job is to sit down and meet with the folks that not necessarily agree with what I do. And I do that already with a lot of my outreach. I mean, I believe in community outreach. The only way to come to a mutual understanding of what we can do together is to sit and have the discussions. Again, I would say I would enjoy sitting with the folks that spoke earlier today to hear what they have to say and see how can we work things out to make it better for the department and the community that we're going on. But to me, it's leadership. It's a constant highlighting of the message that we want to do, and then it's honoring the people that do a good job and holding those accountable to not fall in line with what's going to go on. If we don't, people expect more of us being peace officers. We're held to a higher standard, and if we're not worthy of that higher standard, people are not going to respect any of us. So we could have 4,699 people do a great job. One person does something bad, it reflects on all of us. So we have to manage ourselves, care for ourselves, and care for our community. So that's how we do it.
Something, excuse me, something that I've done to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in law enforcement is I serve as a crisis call taker for CopLine, which is a 724 crisis call line at the national level. And the calls that I get from young officers around the country, senior administrators, tell me that there's issues with really identifying the humanness in law enforcement, as well as, well, for the law enforcement to see the humanness on the other side, within the community. So my answer on how to deal with both of those disparate groups is we've got to bring those walls down that exist between law enforcement and the community. And I think the only way to do that is by being vulnerable, almost to the point of being intimate. And that, I think, by expressing vulnerability on both sides, expressing feelings beyond simply mad, sad, and glad, really would build up intimacy, vulnerability, and drop those walls. And so I think that would serve both sides beneficially.
Ask my colleagues if they have any additional questions. One final point I'll make, and it's not really a question because I know everyone naturally always says yes, but the collaboration and cooperation between our board and the sheriff is vital. I understand and respect that there are statutory limits on what the Board of Supervisors does and sets and what the sheriff does and sets, and I respect that. I appreciate that, and I understand that. I will tell you at times we have had moments of collaboration and cooperation. We've had moments where we didn't, and when we didn't, it did not really serve anyone's interests. We had a huge fight over the inmate lookup system, which was a clear attempt to evade the intent of SB 54. The date it was changed, the way it was changed, the way it was employed afterwards was incredibly clear. The timing, why that happened. It wasn't necessary. And San Diego wasn't the only county that did it, right? There were other counties that all did it on the same timeline and trajectory, but it's things like that that can erode that trust. Right? And it ended up getting changed, but it didn't get changed until after a big, huge fight with everyone railing against the sheriff's department. That's not needed. We had a huge fight over the desire to outsource 100% of the medical in the jails. You're not going to get better outcomes by that. Nowhere they did that got better outcomes. And we wasted 6 months where we ought to have been focused on getting more people hired in the right spots. Right? And so I think as a board, you're going to find us. We want better outcomes in our jails. And we're willing to do things, not just the investment in clinicians, but the investment in infrastructure, right? Something that is not wholly supported, right, across all segments of the community, but we know that we got to do. We also, as a board, care deeply about your deputies. We do. We care about how they're supported and how they're trained and how they're staffed, how they're paid. We care about how they're recruited and retained. And so know that as a board, right, we are going to get further if we can lock arms and go further. Lowering recidivism is in everyone's interest. It's in the public safety interest. Building trust between the community, it's in everyone's interest. It's in your deputy's interest, it's in the community's interest. And so I hope as we move forward over these next 9 to 10 months that we can keep that spirit of being collaborative and working together as a board and as a sheriff's department, understanding that you know, we all have our job to do. And so I look forward to, with great optimism, that spirit and sense that we can do that. I see Supervisor Anderson, and then I think we'll vote.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. As a board member that represents and lives in the unincorporated area, we've seen a big shift over the last decade with increased homelessness and the issue of it. And while we've created a homeless office in that where the board's taking it very seriously, trying to move forward, I know that my constituents are very concerned because sometimes, as we saw today, the DA pointed out that sometimes crime follows the homeless. So what my question to you is, while we're working with social services to address the issue, it's going to be on your radar. And I'm going to continue to add more pressure in the unincorporated area to address this issue. It was one of my campaign promises. And so I'd like to get a beat on what you see your role in participating in that process is moving forward.
Thank you. So homeless is an everybody problem. It's not just a law enforcement problem. It's not just a medical provider problem. It's an everybody problem because our homeless folks are all family members from somebody, somewhere, whether local or from out of town or wherever they come from. I see the role of the Sheriff's Department is to be a facilitator. There are times when there's criminal activity and we have to engage in the criminal enforcement. I see a larger role being able to identify, network, and connect people that are homeless with resources, whether it's with their family members in the region or outside, whether it's a treatment if they have narcotics issues, if they have mental health issues, we need to get another type of program. There's tremendous veterans programs where if we can connect somebody, that we find a veteran, the VA hospital or the Veterans Administration will help us with these folks. So we have to, we can't arrest somebody from, like, and in your district, from one town and drive them and drop them off somewhere else. We have to try to find a solution to that. And the homeless person themselves also have to be willing to accept the resources that we have. I mean, I work with a man in East County who has a hotel with 100 beds, but he can't fill the 100 beds because the homeless people that would stay there don't want to follow the rules of not doing drugs or doing certain things that are maybe in this area there. So we have to be that connectivity. We have to understand the programs, the ability, and get people where they need to be, and we have to be patient. Not everyone is homeless because they want to be. In fact, most people are not homeless because they're not there because they want to be. It's situations. There's people that have lost their job and they're temporarily homeless. There's people that haven't had a home in years. There's people that choose to live that life because that's what they want to do, but that's a very much smaller group. We almost have to be all things to everybody when we contact someone that's homeless and try to figure out on the spot what can we do temporarily to ease this issue and what can we do in the long term to maybe get this person a place to live, a job, a focus, someone to help them to go forward. But there is no one solution, and it's going to take a group. And I've been part, since I was a sergeant, I've been part of the East County Homeless Task Force on and off doing different jobs, and there is no easy one solution. I know that there are hundreds of groups in the county and people that want to do a good job in terms of feeding, housing, clothing, administering to and taking care of. And we have to find the way to get an individual person connected with that one resource that will help that one individual and then follow up on that in that area. And so I would continue to work in those areas and ask my people to do the same.
Thank you. I think I read somewhere once before, St. Paul calls us to be a man for all seasons, tells us to be ready for whatever comes our way, but to hold ourselves accountable was the essence of what that particular scriptural passage referred to. And I believe addressing homeless wherever they are is a collaborative approach, and it's very, very simple response, but a complex process, only in the sense that you have to get everyone to cooperate. The Sheriff's Department is a crime enforcement, a law enforcement organization. However, as I mentioned earlier, we will never forget humanity. We can't afford to do that, nor are we allowed to do that. When I come out as a deputy sheriff, I used to tell trainees and young deputies, when you get the call to go investigate a particular type of crime, you're not to respond and automatically write reports. Our job is to conduct a good, thorough preliminary investigation. We find the details of the crime, we support it with the evidence and witnesses, we collect it, we package it up, and we send it on. Typically, it's handed on to an investigator who finishes this process, and then we make the arrest, or it goes to court somehow. That same process is always in place, and it's always available to the deputy sheriff. It's a structured, organized way to respond to problems. On the subject of homelessness, we want to do what we call a unified command. The deputies called for this problem, maybe it's unsightly. There's always something there that we can take enforcement on or find a resource to help this person along. Arresting in custody is not always the answer, and the deputies should be keen. They should be reminded and support that we have other resources available to problem solving. Remember, we're peace officers. We're not automatic jailers or automatic report writers. We're free men and women who are engaged, and we promise to think and to apply these skills and education and training to solving problems. And this is the pro-person approach that I referred to earlier. So this collaborative approach, if I find that the proper resource is to get Health and Human Services on there, we move to what we call a cops mode, community-oriented policing. We have to stay involved with the problem once we find out what it is and direct the resources on there. Even today, unfortunately, we still have war. Well, we can press a button, we can launch a missile, but there's someone there who follows and guides it and makes sure that we hit what we intend to hit, what needs to be hit, and we can support our findings on why we should hit that target. In this case, we're talking about a human life that's the target, and we want to direct the missile or the right resources to this person so he or she can move on and become a fully contributing citizen here in our county. We can do that rurally, we can do that urbanly. It's what peace officers are called
to do. So I know that in around 2012, the board funded a problem-oriented policing team for the Sheriff's Department. I think that the idea of program-based budgeting is very important because by funding that team then, it was possible very recently to switch the focus of that team to a homeless outreach team that the Sheriff's Department is using now. And I think that's the appropriate way to address the sheriff's role in dealing with the homeless, because obviously it's a partnership with social service agencies and mental health agencies. So while the patrol function is to really enforce laws, that team for homeless outreach can deal more with resources on a more humanist issue. Laws do exist to promote health and safety for everyone, and I think those laws do need to be used as tools for law enforcement. Thank you.
I thank you all for your responses, and I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you applying. I know this is a rigorous process, and I'm not sure how it's going to end, but for the two that don't get chosen, I appreciate you stepping forward to wanting to serve your community to the best of your ability. The last thing I'd just like to say is I do think that as we're moving forward addressing homelessness, coordinating with other law enforcement, coordinating with everybody around and looking at it more from a regional approach. Too often in the past, one municipality or another will sweep them into the county, and then the county sweeps them back. And I think that all three of your answers were very focused on the individual and lifting those people and giving them the help that they need. And for that, I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. Vice Chair Vargas.
I just, it's mostly a comment or a request, as one of you will be selected. You know, I happen to have 4 cities in my district, right? I have the city of Chula Vista, Imperial Beach, National City, and city of San Diego. But within that, the Sheriff's Department actually is law enforcement for both the city of, not cities, but for Bonita and for Imperial Beach, Otay Mesa and Lincoln Acres, and a couple of other unincorporated areas. So you know, publicly would like to ask that whoever the person is that is selected, come join me in the next, month or so to really connect with the community as soon as possible, because we have some issues that are pending in the community. I know that there's a lot of things that the person who is selected will be addressing, but really in the communities of Imperial Beach and Bonita, we have some things that we need to address very quickly. So I'm going to say it publicly and asking, hopefully, that you all commit that would be part of something that you will do. Thank you.
All right, not seeing any additional requests. Again, we appreciate all 3 of you. Board has a difficult decision to make, and I think, we value and appreciate all of you and your service to the county. And so I'm going to have the clerk distribute the ballots. I'll remind members of the board that not just the results will be announced, but how each supervisor votes will be as well, to be fully transparent.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. The results are that Anthony Ray received 5 votes from all 5 supervisors, and with that, Anthony Ray will be appointed to serve as and complete the current term of the County Office of the Sheriff, contingent upon passing the county's background investigation standard medical exam.
Congratulations, Mr. Ray. Welcome to Sheriff Roll. And thank you all 3 for the grace and dignity by which you handled this process. And thank you again to everyone who participated. We know we have a lot of work left to do. And so now we have to continue that work as we move ahead. So thank you all for joining us. With that, we stand adjourned.
The next regular meeting of the board will take place on Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 at 9 a.m.